So our agenda for today is we are going to review our progress in the course so far. Modules 0 to 3 have a Q&A. I'd like for you guys to share some of your learned skills and some ideas you have. And then we will do as much time as we have for the learning objectives presentation. Like I said, it's going to be some similar information and also some new information. Now, if we don't get all the way through it, it's okay, because I'm going to post the presentation in this Zoom page, Module 3 Zoom check-in. The presentation today is there, and I will put this video there too, because Abby's going to want to look at it next week as well and review what we did today, because Abby's in the field at the moment. Okay, so let's just start. How you guys been doing for the past 3 weeks on the course? Anybody want to share some overall thoughts and questions? It could be progress, Q&A, whatever you want to say.
It's like how lacking, especially like the geology, like 101 classes, as far as like an online class. And I've only, we've only done 3 modules essentially. So really getting to see like how much, can actually be changed in some of the online classes that we already have is really fun to see. Makes me feel kind of bad for the online, like for teaching that online class so poorly. Wasn't as much support as there is here. But
can you tell me some things that maybe you're learning that you hadn't seen before, or what are some of these things that you might want to incorporate?
Yeah, so just having actual like learning goals and like outcomes, like we didn't even think about it. We kind of just took the online class that was already there and just gave them the online textbook, and we're like, all right, like, go for it. So even like something as simple as like looking at that. And then I really liked previously, like, because I just did these, like doing like the needs assessments and like learning a lot about that and getting like the needs analysis surveys. I never like thought about a pretest being like a needs analysis type of thing. So thinking about it in that way, I actually want to try to incorporate it into the class that I'm going to be teaching in person in the fall. Because it definitely wasn't really something that I did for any like the in-person labs. So incorporating some of that, even like the in-person stuff, is definitely stuff that I'm looking forward to.
Ian, I noticed on one of your, I can't remember where you said this, but on one of them, it's the end of the day and I'm losing my mind. I'm losing my thoughts, losing my mind, losing my thoughts. You mentioned how you liked the idea of using pretests. And I don't know if you were talking about that just for assessments or the whole idea of pretests. I've never done this, but I'm going to give you another idea of how to use pretests. Maybe Alistair and Renee have done this. I think they do it a lot in the sciences. So you guys are College of Science. Pretest, post-test, every module. You start a module with pretest and you end the module with the same post-test. Now you're not expecting them to know many of the answers there at the first pretest, but it's just kind of like, it's like, wow, I actually learned. It's a measurable, they can see how much they learned at the beginning. I don't know any of this. And then they learn and they take it again. It's like, wow, I learned a lot. And not only is it good for them to show their learning, it shows you how much the effectiveness of the learning. So it is a way to do. I mean, if you really do like the pretest, you could do a pretest post-test for each module. Alistair and Renee, have you ever done pretest post-test when you've been teaching?
Yeah, I've used Qualtrics to do that.
Oh, nice.
With the online field camp, the virtual field camp.
Okay, cool. So, and we do have access to Qualtrics. You can use Qualtrics, so you can just use the Canvas quizzes. Alistair, have you ever done pretest post-test?
Oh yeah, and multiple times, and not usually per module. Usually that's a bit too much, but
okay.
Beginning end of course or free parts of the course. My favorite one though, this is amusing, is that I once gave them a pretest for a midterm, and I went over the questions afterwards going, hey, this is what you got wrong, and I emphasized this question which half of you got wrong, you really need to focus on, here's the right way to do it. I gave them the same question in the midterm, half still got it wrong. I gave them the same question in the final, half still got it wrong, and there was a different half each time, which was just fascinating.
That's really interesting.
So that's where it didn't work, but yeah, I do them regularly. The one thing I would just throw in, adding on top of what Ian has said, that I personally don't agree with in what we covered, is that I usually do module-based student learning outcomes. I go down all the way to the module and then map up all the way to the course and then to the program and then to the university.
Well, we're going to do that. Have we? Maybe I haven't said it yet, but we're going to be doing that.
Oh, in section 2, I believe it was, it told me I was wrong, because
Really?
I said the learning outcomes were at the module level, and it said no, and I had to like go back
Oh, okay.
and redo the assignment because
Is it? Well, okay. I better go back and check. Maybe I made an error. Is it in one of the quizzes?
yeah, it was in that
Okay,
one
I'll check the
where-
quiz.
I can't remember which one it was, but it was I think the program goals and outcomes.
Okay.
It was saying that it was well, and it might be just a nomenclature difference, because like in each separate module I have learning
Yeah.
outcomes, because that's
Yeah.
what we usually do in lectures. We're like, hey, the main thing we want you to get out of this lecture is this, and then you go
Yeah.
through it, and then you give a summary of, hey, if you want to take home anything from this lecture today, this is what it is. And so
Okay.
that'd be that module level
Yeah.
learning outcome.
Okay. Well, let me clarify, because yeah, there may be a mistake in that quiz, which I need to go back and check.
That's okay.
Because that module, though, the focus of that module was program goals and outcomes, because we start big with like what we're aligning to. And then if I didn't touch on module outcomes, which it's very interesting, I don't know why I would have just like left them out. Probably in my thinking, I'm thinking, okay, now we'll do program goals. And then once we get to design, we'll do module. But when I do the presentation today, we'll talk about module level outcomes. Yes, we go that far down.
Awesome.
Okay. We go all the way down, and you'll see in every module, in our module overview, you'll have the student learning outcomes and then the module outcomes. And then it's like we align them, because we align them like this. The student learning outcomes, the SLOs, are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you've got your module outcomes. In this module, we're going to do this, and this meets number 3. This meets number 4, or maybe this meets number 1 and 3. So that's how we're mapping it. And later, when we get to design in September, we are literally going to map the course. We're going to make a course map. So that way we will visually see the alignment and what maybe we find some things that are missing, or maybe we find some things that are too heavy. And that's where we're going to see, we will visually be able to see what we need to do with the course. And let me just, okay, before I move on, that made me think of this. I'm going to add one more thing to the course, and I'm going to add it at the end of module 3, but I'm going to add it again at the module 4, beginning of module 4. So you'll see it when you come back too. But I'm creating a, this isn't a class, it's an institute, but I call it a class because I'm just so used to classes. I'm going to call it a class notebook. I'm making a class notebook, and in that class notebook, I'm putting the assignments for each module in there. And then, because I want you guys to, when you get, either before you leave or when you get back, one of the first things I'd like for you to do is to go back to the assignments and copy and paste them in your responses in the notebook. I've copied the assignment, and then I have a space, paste your response to the assignment here. That way, once we start getting into the design of the course, we're not going to have to go back into which assignment was that? Where did I put that? It's all going to be in the notebook. So you can go back and copy and paste from the notebook, because there's a lot of pieces that we're doing that are going to come into play in September when we start designing and then when we start developing, but we don't want it all buried in the course. So I'm getting a notebook that how it's going to work is I'm creating one master notebook, and then I'm going to put it in that shared folder in OneDrive. And then you guys are going to make a copy of it and paste it, copy and paste it. Okay. Because each of you need an individual copy of the notebook, but I'll have that ready. Well, by the end of the week, but you guys will have the choice of whether you want to start inputting your stuff before you leave, or probably one of the first things you do when you get back. Okay. So, any other sharing of ideas or questions? Any other things that we want to discuss before we move on? That's okay, because what we're going to do here, the presentation is going to be a review, and some new. And as we go, let's just keep this like an open forum. If there's something that piques your interest or you have a question about, just stop and say it. We will have time for Q&A at the end, but let's just talk as we go. And like I said, we may finish the presentation or we may not, depending on how good our conversation is. But the presentation will be in the module and you can review it later. Okay, so let me go ahead and get the PowerPoint up here, and then we shall go. Okay, so remember, at any time, go ahead and unmute and speak. I normally would say, hey, raise your hand, but I'm not going to be watching you guys because I'm watching the slides. So just unmute and speak if you've got something to say, okay? So we're talking about learning objectives today. And along with that are program goals, student learning objectives, all of the competencies. All of this together, everything we learned about, the goals, the objectives, all that, they're called competent. The big broad term for it are competencies, what you want students to know and do in your course. So
I do have a quick question. Sorry,
Sure.
before I get too far ahead. Did you post the presentation from last meeting, or?
I did not, but I will. I'll do
Okay.
that when we're done.
Okay,
Let me
thank
make
you.
a note. Let me make a note. Post first presentation. But I didn't record it, so we won't have a recording. I will have a recording of this one. Okay, so we're going to talk about learning objectives and writing objectives. It's our agenda, and those are our objectives too, because that's what we're going to cover today. So what's the difference between all these guys? Goals, outcomes, objectives, competencies. Let me just stop there because you guys have learned about this. You guys want to throw out anything that you remember from the learning? What are some difference between any of these guys?
Go on, Haley, you can do it. Or Ian. I see Ian's become invisible.
Ian is Ian. Haley, you remember one of them?
I'm working my way through it. I haven't quite got there yet.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Yeah, I've been really busy with family, so I'm plugging my way in. I just barely started the goals and objectives.
That's okay. Hey, Ian, do you remember the difference between any of these guys? The goals, the objectives, the outcomes? I'm not expecting you to remember anything, but if anything comes to your mind, I'm going to tell you all of it's coming. So if not, why don't I just move forward? You want to say something or you want me to move forward?
I was just going to say more like the spectrum of them. So goals, like learning goals and stuff, usually more broad, as well. Like the objectives are usually like fairly focused, as well as like the outcomes. You're looking for something more specific for those, something that's a little more measurable is, I guess, the way I would put it. Okay, great. And competencies we didn't really discuss in the module, but competencies are what you want the students to know and do. And there's a big movement in learning and in education now of competency-based learning, which is really focused on the objective-based learning. Okay,
So we'll start with student learning objectives and module level objectives. We have two, and remember when I think I said it in the modules, but if not, objectives and outcomes pretty much means the same thing. Similar, very, very similar. There might be a bit of a difference, but overall objective and outcome are similar. So our student learning objectives, that's our course, our objectives related to the course. They're very broad statements, and it's what we want students to be able to do by the end of the course. Those are our SLOs. Now, our module learning objectives, like Alistair was talking about, those are very specific statements, and they align with the module at the module level. They support and they align with these guys, the SLOs. Okay, so they're very specific, whereas the student learning objectives are broad. So you'll see on the, like I said, on the module pages, I've got these guys first in this module. These are the course level objectives that this module reaches. And it's not going to be all of them. It may just be one or two. It may be a few or just one. Each module is going to hit on a different SLO and probably a combination of them. So the module learning objectives is very micro based upon that module. What are you going to do in that module that aligns with, supports these broader SLOs? And they describe what the learners should be able to do by the end of the module. So SLOs are what learners should do by the end of the course. MLOs are what students should be able to do by the end of the module. And they come together and align. So what are the benefits of learning objectives? And I've got two slides of this, because first of all, what are the benefits for the students? And then on the next slide, what are the benefits for the teachers? So learning objectives benefit the students because they help them identify what they should be able to expect for their learning. It doesn't matter what kind of prior experience, prior knowledge they've had with the subject. If they've never even had a geology course, or they've never had any of you as teachers, they help students just kind of get an idea of what the course is going to be about. And they also tell students what's going to be important in the course, because a course covers a lot of things, 16 weeks, many, many modules, maybe 16 modules. Is everything equally important? No, some stuff is more important than others. So the objectives help students clarify what's important. And they also help students self-assess how they're doing in the course and what they need to do to be successful in the course. Now, how do learning objectives benefit teachers, instructors? Hugely, hugely. Some may say, not me, but some may say, oh, learning objectives, they're really primarily benefit the instructors more than the students. Teachers might think that, but not always. Students do care about the learning objectives, especially adult learners. Adult learners need to know what they're learning and why they're learning it and how they're going to learn it. So it's critical for adult learners to have learning objectives. But learning objectives help the instructors. It helps us develop our course, helps us design it, helps us organize everything so that we can have alignment with the learning objectives, with the program outcomes, with the college outcomes and all that stuff. It helps us improve the assessment of student performance. It really targets that assessment and makes sure that we're covering the most important things of the course. And got to have them, because if we don't have them, then we don't have any accreditation, and universities rely upon their accreditation. And learning objectives, that could be, some might say, oh, we need them for our accreditation. Yes, you do, but there are also other reasons why they are important. Now, where should you put these guys in the course? You've identified them. And we're going to, by the end of this, you're going to have well-written objectives and outcomes. So where are you going to put them? Well, at the course level, at the broad level, you're going to put them in the syllabus. First of all, list them in the syllabus. And we're going to be making a course map. We're going to put the objectives on our course map. On the home page. Okay, this is like this, or all three. Okay, it doesn't have to be in all three places, but if you have a course map, they have to be there, and we will have one, so they'll be there. Homepage, it's your choice whether you put objectives on your homepage or not. Some instructors choose to, some don't. And in the getting started module, let me see what I call that module. The first one, is it called getting started? Hold on, I'm opening the modules page. A minute. Yeah, in module 0, I've got getting started. I do have them there. I'm not sure on which page, but they're there. So they also go in the getting started module. And then we also put our objectives in the modules or the unit level. Some people call these modules, and some people call them units, and they mean the same thing. It's just how you choose to use the terminology. So where do we put the objectives in the module? We put them on the module overview pages. This course is going to have a module overview page for every module. So they're there. And as Alistair, did you say this, or was I thinking it in my mind? You put them at the beginning of presentations. Where did you say you put your module objectives, Alistair?
Yeah, usually when I have a presentation, I'll have what the basic, I call them student learning outcomes there, but again, nomenclature. Yeah. But I usually have after the cover slide, I then have the main topics, and then directly after that, I usually have a slide which is the learning outcomes of this lesson are to understand, boom, 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 boom. And then at the end of the lesson, I'll sometimes I do, but most times I will have a summary slide re-highlighting the main takeaways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's a best practice. So note what Alistair just said there, because got to be done. And if you go present at a conference, has to be done. It's not something that you can skip. The objectives have to be on the presentation, all your presentations, course-wide and conference-wide. You also put them on all of the activities and assessments. And as I was going through this, I thought, ooh, gosh, there's some more places where I need to put them. So as I go back through and clean and tidy up and stuff, I'm going to add the MLOs to some different things, like make sure they're on the activities and assessments. And I hadn't put them on the wrap-up module. I'll do that too on the module summary. So that's a couple more places that I'm personally going to put them. Now that doesn't mean you have to put them everywhere, but they do need to be on the module overview pages. And if you give a presentation, they should be there. And it would be a great idea if you could put them on the activities and the assessments and the wrap-up module. But then again, this is kind of overkill. You can choose where you'd like to put them. Now, the next section we're going to look is how we write these learning objectives. Now, we'll touch upon this, but we're going to come back to objectives once we start the design module, just to make sure that we kind of have gone over conceptually what they are and how they differentiate from each other. Once we come back in September, we'll go over them again just to make sure that they're well written, but we'll touch upon it now and we'll come back to it in September, writing them. So learning objectives, when we write them, there's certain ways they need to be written. They need to be measurable, okay? And they need to be student focused. And that means student focused more versus teacher focused. They need to be, by the end of this course, students will be able to, and then bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, your objectives. That's student focused because it's what will students be able to know and do. If it's not student focused, it's teachers focused. And it's by the end of this course, I will teach you how to, that's not student focused, that's teacher focused. Okay, so don't focus on what you will be imparting to students, and focus on what they will be able to know and do. Focus on the student first. So then you can just do that by putting students. By the end of this module, by the end of this course, students will be able to, there, you just hit upon student focused. And we'll touch upon measurable once we look at the verbs. What the verb you choose determines whether it's measurable or not. And those are the Bloom's verbs. And the objectives, oh, they should be reasonable in number. This course is not reasonable in number because this course is very specific. I had to get very detailed on the SLOs. I had to do that because the modules are so, they're all one theme, but they're so different in topic that I needed to have enough SLOs that I could make MLOs. So that's why we have a lot here, because we got to really break it down, this course, but not every course needs to be that long. Generally, reasonable in number means about 3 to 5, maybe a few more. Okay, but you don't want 10, 15, 20. Okay, I'd say 8 is maybe getting too many, but anywhere and somewhere in there. And the learning objectives, we've talked about alignment. They should be aligned to the program, the department, institutional. You may have professional outcomes that you need to meet, discipline ones and national ones, like engineering and accounting and economics, among many, many, many others, have national standards that they have to meet. So those need to be there too. So that brings me back to the other issue we had when I had you look for your the outcomes for the programs you're going to be teaching for. And then Alistair, you came back and said that was going to be a little problematic because they're at the major level. So I'm confused. Did I in the pages following that of all of the outcomes, were they all there or were they missing? You were saying the outcomes are at the major level.
Yeah, I think they were there when I went.
They were there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we got the right ones. Okay. All right. So that's what they should be. And as I was just saying, this is the lead in to make it the learning objectives student centered. You need the lead in at the end of this course or at the end of this module. Students should be able to, and then you have an action verb plus the knowledge, the skill, or the behavior. So here's some examples of some well-written objectives. These are written well. Apply APA formatting and citations to papers and assignments. This apply, analyze, and solve, that's the action verb, and you can measure these. We're going to look at some verbs soon that you're not going to be able to measure. So the key word here is you have to be able to measure the learning. And the next one is analyze. Analyze the role of conflict in individual and societal systems. And then for a math class, solve a system of linear equations using matrix inverse calculations. Okay, so a few different high level objectives there. These are high. We're going to see that some of the measurable ones, we can go very high critical thinking, we could go mid of critical thinking, or we could go very low critical thinking. We have to hit the skill, the taxonomy level that we want. And we'll get to Bloom's in a minute and look at the taxonomy.
Here we go. Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
So if you go back to the last slide, in my courses, I used to say at the end of this course, students should be able to, but I really felt like that was so impersonable. And so I replaced it with you.
Yes.
Able to do this.
Thank you for saying that. I do that a lot, Renee, because I've had the same conflict. I personally like that better. On my courses, mine are all at the end of this course, at the end of this module, you should be able to.
And
I had a little, I think it's identity.
Professors, yeah, that say students should be able to, and it's very generalized, but it's just not like personalized. Like,
there you go.
We're worried about you in this course.
You is even better. So make a note, put that in all capital letters. You should be able to, because that's my preference too. So let's go on to Bloom's now. So Bloom's taxonomy, a taxonomy is like a classification of skills. So Bloom, I don't know what his first name was, but his name was Bloom. could have been Michael Bloom, back in 1950s or 60s, he created a taxonomy of critical thinking skills. So the goal for our students is to increase their critical thinking. And if we want to do that, then we need to decide what level of critical skill do we want them to know. We start down here, real low level. We want them to remember something. Remembering is a critical thinking skill, but it's not very high. And we wouldn't want a whole course of remember and understand. But some remember and some understand are okay, but we're really trying to get up here in the hots. So remember and understanding are lower, and the lower order thinking skills are the lots. Here's the middle ones: applying what you've learned and analyzing what you've learned. These are the middle level of critical thinking. We call these the MOTS, the MOTSs. These are golden. The HOTS are golden. You want to hit the HOTS. HOTS are, you want them to evaluate, synthesize, create. That's where you want to get them. But in a course, you can't be all high. You got to reach all these levels. Okay, because when they start a module, they don't know anything. They have to understand. You've got to give them some background information and get them to understand. And that's with the readings and the videos and all the background information and the activities that they're doing. But no, not the activities, sorry. It's like the supplemental resources of what they're learning. The activities are where you can hit them, the MOTS and the HOTS. Depending on what activity you choose, you're increasing or decreasing the level of critical thinking. So the Bloom's, the taxonomy, this was revised, by the way, and that's really important to know, because this right here, these lots and hots, this is the revised taxonomy. Kraithwall, and I'm not good at my researchers, but Kraithwall and somebody, they revised it maybe the 1990s and redid the taxonomy. We still give Bloom credit, but we call it Bloom's revised taxonomy because we don't want to go with Bloom's original taxonomy because it's been revised and it's been enhanced. So this is the taxonomy we're looking at. And if you ever Google it, you want Bloom's revised taxonomy. So it's a hierarchy of cognitive domain. So our cognitive skills have a hierarchy. Some are more valuable thinking skills than others. And it classifies our cognitive processes. And it provides structure for the student learning. So as I was showing you, it moves from the lower order thinking skill, the lower order thinking skills, the LOTs, the middle order thinking skills, apply, analyze, the MOTS, and our golden ones, the HOTS, the golden boys, the golden girls, are evaluate and create. That's what you really want to get to in your courses. So remember, you want to start here and you want to move up. And don't stay in the LOTs and don't stay in the MOTS. Make sure you get to the HOTS. Okay, now this is why I said the PDF, it's actually the PDF. The PDF of this is in the module because I don't expect you to remember all these verbs, okay? But they're there for you to go back to and remember. These are the ones you need to avoid. Avoid, do not use these guys. These are not measurable. So these are words to avoid and phrases to avoid. Can you measure what you hear? It's really hard. Really hard. Can you measure what you understand? Not really, because really, if you want to measure what you understand, then go to the taxonomy level of understand and choose a verb that's more measurable under there. So you'll want to study these of what phrases to avoid and what words to avoid because they're not measurable. And you'll really increase the quality of your objectives just by tweaking the verb. That's really a lot of times all that you need to do. Verb change. So watch out for these guys. And then, like we said in the module, we need to align those SLOs and MLOs. The MLOs, the module learning objectives, need to align to at least one of the SLOs and or more, one or more SLOs. And the module learning, this is a good one here. Module learning objectives should not be hotter than the student learning objective. So if you're reaching a student learning objectives that's low, like remember or understand, then your module learning objective needs to be low. So it shouldn't be hotter than the SLO. So just keep it at the same taxonomy level, your module learning objectives and your student learning objectives. And the best practice is for each student learning objectives to be addressed by multiple MLOs instead of just one. Okay, ideal, because by the end of the course, you want several of these MLOs to be aligned to each SLO. And like I said, we'll be able to see it, visualize it when we start mapping the course in the design module. Now, here's common mistakes of learning objectives. And let me tell you, I see so many mistakes with learning objectives. It's just so common because they're difficult to get right. So here are the most common mistakes in people that are writing them. They're not measurable. They're using the words you should, oh gosh, these guys, people use these all the time. And that's one of the first things I check. Are your verbs measurable? No, boy, you can increase them just by changing them to a measurable verb. The SLOs and the MLOs are the same. They can't be the same. The SLOs are more broad, and the MLOs are more specific. So they have to be different. The MLOs are going to be measuring the SLOs. Also measuring multiple outcomes in one objective. And you'll see this if you've got, I don't know, I can't think of, let me go back and get a good one and then I'll tell you a bad example. Okay. What about this one here? I'll tell you how that one, you don't want it to make it multiple. Analyze the role of conflict and power in individual and societal systems. That violates that rule. I have analyzed the role of conflict. That's one objective. Analyze the role of power. That's a separate objective. So if you have an and you've got two things, then you need to break them up into separate objectives. Make sure that the objective only measures one concept. Okay. Let me go back to our page. Where are we? So no ands. Well, I'm not going to say no ands. There could be a case for an and, but use your judgment and don't measure more than one concept in one objective. And the other common mistakes that objectives are really activities. I think we saw that in one of our Padlets or one of our assignments. Some of those objectives were activities. They weren't objectives. They weren't outcomes. So these are some of the common mistakes. And well, this is an activity. We might be able to try this here. Can you guys see this, or is it too little? Tell me if you can read this or not. Maybe we could do a couple of these.
Yeah, I can read it.
Okay, let's do a couple of these guys and just go through and let's see. We want to know if these objectives, are they specific? Are they measurable and observable? Are they student-centered? And are they outcome-based? So I'll read the first one and then 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's 4 of you, so maybe we could each of you could take one of these columns here. Here I have you guys in order. If we can go like this, Alistair, if you can go first, Ian, you go second, Haley, you go third, and Renee, you go fourth. So Alistair, you're specific, measurable objective. Ian, Haley, you're student-centered, and Renee, if you can tell if it's outcome-based. So Alistair, number 1, students will learn how to develop a well-designed argument.
It's kind of on the fence. It's like, it's specific in some respects, but it's not specific in others because, define an argument.
Exactly. And I think what we're going to see is going to come out in the bathwater here. So let's just say, for the first one. What do you think measurable wise, Ian?
I think that's going to depend on kind of like the rubric that it's with. But just like as is, like it could be measurable if like the rubric has like a definition for like a well-designed argument. So
Okay, let me ask if anybody else has anything to say about measurable before I say something about measurable. Renee says no. Why do you think it's not, Renee?
I don't know. When I think measurable, I think quantitative or like something that, yeah, it's more than qualitative.
Okay, Haley, were you going to say something? I don't know.
It was basically what Renee said. Like, there's no way to measure how, like, the learn or
Right.
the argument that, yeah. So that's basically
So
what I was
do you remember what we just went through with Bloom's? All you have to do here is you could make this measurable. This is not measurable as is, but you could make it measurable by just finding the taxonomy you want to hit and choosing one of the verbs. If you want it to be develop, maybe that's going to be create. Maybe you get a good create on the create taxonomy and choose a verb there. Then you've got a really great one. So students will learn how to develop by the end of this course, students will create. No. Students will learn how to develop I don't know, I got to think. It's the end of the day and I can't think very well now, but I always have my list of Bloom's verbs in front of me and up on my screen. Okay. Cause I work with these objectives and outcomes all the time. I mean, 2 windows I always have open, thesaurus.com and my Bloom's list, because all I got to do is I find the right verb on the right taxonomy and then I plug it in and then I've made it measurable. Haley, what do you think about student-centered?
Well, it seems like it's focused on students about what they're going to hopefully learn in that objective area.
Okay. Yeah, it is student-centered. And what do you think about outcome-based, Renee?
There is an outcome, which is the well-designed argument. It's just very vague.
Yeah. So what do you think it needs to be rewritten? Okay, this objective needs to be rewritten. The main problem is it's not measurable and you just can't observe how well designed the argument is unless you reword it and choose a better Bloom's verb hitting the taxonomy level. And then that way you've made it measurable and you've got some critical thinking in there. It's just going to be needed to be reworked. Let's look at number 2. Why don't we go backwards this time? Renee, you're the first one. Haley, you're the second one. Ian, third, and Alistair, fourth. Students will list 5 ways that GIS is being used to address real-world outcomes. What do you think, Renee, for specific?
I would say, yeah.
Okay. Haley, measurable, observable?
I think so, because it says the 5 ways, so you can observe and like measure if they get that. Because it's their deliverable is you have to have something physical to turn in.
Okay, and student-centered, Ian?
I'm muted. Oh my gosh. I'd say yes.
Okay, and what do you think about outcome-based, Alistair?
Yeah, that's kind of where I get a little bit slides off a little bit, because listing is not really I would say being able to list something is not really an outcome. It's not an action. It's not, creating an example of how GS is used to map different scenarios or whatever. So I don't see it as very outcome based. I see it as kind of very weak.
Yeah, and it's very specific, right? And outcomes are not supposed to be specific. They're supposed to be broad. And you're going to list 5 ways. Well, what critical thinking, like Alistair said, where is that hitting the listing? How is that hitting your critical thinking? It's not, because how do you measure listing? All you have to do is create a list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's weak. That would need, it may be specific, it may be student-centered, but it's not very measurable and it's not outcome-based. So you may find that they're going to be okay on some, but not others. But do you think some of these are more important? They're all important, but they're all important. But if it's not measurable, it's out the bathwater. Has to be measurable. And it has to be everything else, but I'd say measurable it's got to be. Let's do one more. We'll go the other way again, start with Alistair. Students will know why checks and balances are important. Is it specific?
Not really. I'm assuming it's referring to like governmental checks.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It's not very clear.
Okay. What about measurable, Ian, and observable?
I mean, it's kind of back to just being able to like list like why they're important. It's kind of like the same thing as that.
I want to say something here. It's weak. It's very weak, but know is kind of like understand. You might be able to make it a little stronger if you went to Bloom's understand taxonomy and chose a more measurable verb, possibly, but we wouldn't know until we really worked with it. So it does hit the taxonomy of understand, but it would totally need to be reworked and a proper verb be chosen. What do you think about student-centered, Haley?
I think it is student-centered.
Yeah. And outcome-based, Renee?
Well, I mean, it is broad, but again, I'm having a hard time with the bigness of it.
Exactly, because it is broad, but it's not measurable. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, all these guys kind of play together, you know, one without the others, they're all going to be weak. So it's just can't say measurable is the most, measurable is very important, but specific or broad, that's really important too. Student-centered is very important, and outcome-based. They're all really important things, and they all go hand in hand. So they got to be together, you know?
I have a quick question. Sorry, this is just something that's kind of not clicking in my brain. So how can you be specific yet broad at the same time for a learning objective?
Well, let's go back and look at the examples. Let me find the ones, and let's try to dissect let's dissect these guys. Okay, because these are good ones. These three down here, these three examples. So how can we be specific and broad at the same time? Do you see any of them here that are specific and broad? I'm looking at the second one. I think they all are, but it's kind of hard to like dissect. It's kind of hard to dissect each one, but I'm looking at number 2 and I say, what's specific? Well, the role of conflict, that's specific. But if it was just analyze the role of conflict in the world, analyze the role of conflict in the world, that's too broad, right? We got to get narrow here. So it is specific. It is the role of conflict. What did you say, Haley? Specific and what?
And broad. Because in my mind, those are kind of like opposite ends of the spectrum.
Okay, well, let's look at this. This is specific. We want to know the role of conflict where in individuals and societal systems. That's specific, because we could just say, analyze the role of conflict in the world. The world is huge. It's too big. You need to narrow it down. So we do want to be broad, but we don't want to be too broad. And I think this does a nice job of getting right down to the crux of what you want, because you don't want to look at conflict in everything. You only want to look at it in individuals and in societies. Okay. And that breaks the world into societies, not just the world. That's just too big. What about this one? Apply APA formatting and citations to papers and assignments. If it was just apply APA formatting and citations, period. To what? Okay, now that would be very broad, but it made it broad and specific by adding to what? To papers and assignments. It's very abstract, Haley, so it is kind of hard to like really conceptualize, to like grasp it. But because they're abstract skills. But just think, the world is broad, but individual and societal systems, that's getting more specific. APA formatting and citations, to what? That's too broad. To papers and assignments makes it more specific. So try to make it relate to something specific. So it's broad and it's specific, but it's not just too broad and it's not just too specific. It's a very tricky dance.
So that middle example there, analyze the role of conflict in individual and societal systems.
Mhm.
It's not measurable, is it?
Yeah, because you're analyzing it. So
Right.
that would be the SLO. Okay. Now, if you're in the module where that is, you've got the module on the module overview page, you'd say, this is our module. So this is our SLO for our student learning outcome. Our module level objective is going to be, you're going to measure it even more. Let me pull up my Bloom's taxonomy real quick, and I'm going to see something here. Just a minute. Okay, hold on. Let me see where we are. Analyze. Okay, so I'm going to show you my screen here so you can see what I'm doing, because this is my process, how I do this all the time. Okay, so let me go back over to this guy. And I don't always use the same list. I mean, some people have a list they like saved on their computer. I don't. I just Google and just click one because they're all good. I just like to see which one do I want to click today. So here's my list. And so you'll see that in the, hold on, sorry. I don't know if I don't have that power. I think I just lost the PowerPoint, but do you remember how the SLO was analyzed? And I can't remember what it was, but it was analyzed. That was the SLO. So now when I get down to the module learning objective, I'm going to go to that taxonomy. I'm going to go to analyze, which is a MOT. It's a middle order. And I'm going to go down here and see how, ooh, look at this, Alistair. List is a verb. We may need to rethink the list. I don't really want to rethink that list 5 though, because the problem was list might be okay. The 5, it was just too specific, and it had other problems, but the problem itself was not necessarily list, but analyze. I don't know. Do you remember what that one was? Analyze something. Now, how are we going to make it measurable? I don't have that outcome there, but a survey is measurable.
It was analyze the role of conflict in individual and societal systems. So
for the module level objective, how it's going to align and how you're going to like really make it specific, you can say survey 3 society, survey the role of conflict in 2 chosen societies. So that means students can choose any 2 societies, and they can survey it. They can compare and contrast those guys. They can examine it. They can inspect it. But if you've got 2, then they're looking at 2 societies and analyzing it, which is the SLO. And how are you going to analyze it? They're going to compare and contrast. They're going to look at the relationships between the 2. This right here, these verbs really are where you're going to hit on, yes, at the SLOs, but a lot of them are going to be hit in the MLOs, because you're taking it from the broad and you're making it more specific. How are you going to measure it? With one of these verbs.
So I would say that in general, I think where Renee is coming to is what I'm also been thinking as well, and that is in STEM-based courses. I think the analyze column should be mostly avoided, and instead the evaluate column should be used, because in general, analyze by itself is not measurable, and most of those words in there are not things that are overly measurable in like if I was doing like a science-based topic, like and analyze the effect of gravity on frogs, something like that. It's
Yeah.
whereas when looking at the evaluate list, there's things in there that make perfect sense in STEM-based courses. We prove things, disproves, we evaluate the importance, we measure the influence, we interpret. And so to me, maybe it's Renee whispered to me this, so it's her thing, not mine, but maybe it's a STEM difference than to a non-STEM difference.
Yeah, but can I ask a stupid layperson question, because I'm not in the STEM field? What would this be okay? Relationships. Examine the relationship between two STEM concepts. Would that be one or not? Would that be good or
I think I'm just having a hard time with the measurable aspect, because measurable is more quantitative to me. So what word did you just use? Examine. So examine is you're noticing. It's more qualitative thing.
Yeah, and I know you're coming from a research angle, but if you could I think we need to separate the quantitative and the qualitative from the outcomes, because they're very important for quantitative and qualitative research. But the research and the course design, it's just a different application of it. Like, for example, okay, that was really good what you said, that this column may not work for you guys. And this is very interesting because I'm not in the STEM field. I'm learning something here. Okay, are you sticking by that, Alistair? Or, I mean, I'm just curious. I'm curious. That is very fascinating. And it's quite possible that it's not a high enough skill, or it's just not a productive skill.
Well, what does Ian and Haley think? Because they've been in a lot of.
Okay, yeah, Ian and Haley, what do you guys think about that? Educate me. You guys are STEM people, and I don't know what to do about this. Analyze.
I think some of them could work. Like, you could have them like define relationships between two things that are similar. I have had some of those words, I guess, for some classes, questions, but they do tend to go more to the evaluate column than stay in the analyze column.
Okay, now what about apply?
Well, we use apply a lot when we're like doing something more practical, like more applied science, which we all do. So we do experiments, we ask people to identify species or taxa, and so it's just interesting, that analyze column. There's just a lot. I think it's, as Renee was kind of implying, that it's probably more geared towards the social sciences than it is to the STEM sciences.
And that's who I am, guys. I'm totally social science. So, and Sean over here is STEM. So I'm learning a lot about the differences between social sciences and STEM. But this is a fascinating one. So possibly this is apply as a MOT. You don't have, I mean, as long as you have a MOT, you've got apply. You don't have to do this MOT. You don't have to do the analyze. And then you do need to do these guys, the remember, understand. I think everybody needs to do those, because that's what we get in our readings and, all the background information that we're learning. We got to learn that first, and then we can apply it. And then after we apply it, we can evaluate it. And then what about create? Do they create things?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That was really, really fascinating. So you guys may want to just avoid this one.
And that's Ian, all. I didn't know if you had more to say.
About Ian. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think some of the stuff in the analyze column is like stuff that I use and be used to seeing, but a lot of it, especially just the word analyze itself, is, I don't know, kind of like a higher I don't want to say like higher order, but it's like, I don't really know how to say it.
It might be middle order.
Are you thinking broader, Ian?
Yeah.
Or just like,
Yeah. Like that kind of broader is like a good way to put it.
It feels kind of vague to me, I guess, because we're more like you have to like be more precise in what you're saying for certain things. So I think analyze, I'm like, okay, how much do you want me to analyze? What, like, I don't know. That's my thought.
Yeah, because they could, like you could say, analyze this igneous rock, but there might be something better you could do. You could do something else that would be more higher
and
or something.
students would definitely not know what to do if you said analyze this rock. you would want to say like, describe the composition and, list the percent of this mineral over this mineral. So it's like a lot more.
Okay, well, that's the difference between the SLO and the MLO. The SLO would be analyze igneous. I mean, it's probably not, I'm not in STEM, so I'm just like this coming off the top of my head. Analyze igneous and sedimentary rocks or whatever. But then that's the SLO. That's where these guys come in on the MLO. And what are you going to do in the module to analyze that rock? What did you use? List, I don't know, examine. Yeah.
Oh.
Did you use some of these guys?
I said identify the minerals and the percents of each, for example.
Yes. And that would be the module level objective. So the module levels are getting a little bit more specific of actually how are you going to evaluate it? How are you going to apply it? How are you going to analyze it? That's broad SLO, and then take these guys down to the MLO. And that's what makes it measurable by using these verbs. Okay, I was pretty much done with the presentation. It was just come into questions and answers and stuff. So are there any questions as we finalize today?
All I'll say is I'm really guilty at using understand.
Well, that's your first step, is you recognized it. Now you can see if there's something you like maybe a little better. Just, yeah, using the principles that we've learned.
I say that too. I say understand a lot, or
well, it's like, a common
know
one.
how to do this, or be able to, I don't remember what was on the list, but yeah, I definitely use a few of those.
And having a list to look at helps you not fall back on the same ones all the time. And it doesn't matter which list you use. Just be sure you put in there Bloom's revised taxonomy, and then just pick one. It doesn't matter which. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and finish up for today. I've really enjoyed all that you've been doing in the course and reading all of your reflections and your activities. It's been very satisfying for me. So next week will be Abby will get started. Renee, you can just keep going. Alistair's just like going. You can just keep going, but you can't really go any further, Alistair, until I finish module 4. I'm not finished with module 4 yet. By the end of the week, I'll be finished with 4, and then I'll open it up next week.
I'm still on number 2, so I'm making my way through, but yeah, I hope to finish.
Yeah. Well, our goal is if we can finish all of this in the summer, we can get to design as soon as we get back in the fall. We'll have a lot of the components that we need to put in. We'll have a lot of pieces. So just keep working, and then when you get back, we'll all be together on module 4. Because Avi's going to start working next week, and he'll do the 3 weeks. You guys will be in field work. And then when you get back, we'll all start 4 together, and possibly, hopefully, I'll say hopefully, we'll have some other people in the cohort too. And I'm thinking about how it's going to work, and I don't think it's going to be a problem. At first I thought everybody's got to be on the same page, but I don't think so. I think we can, we can work at different paces. Well, we'll see. I mean, this is the first time it's been done, so we'll see as we go. But we're just trying to try to be flexible, and we may have some math people joining us possibly, or people from other colleges that don't have their own cohorts. It's a possibility that that might happen and they might join us. That was not our original idea. Our original idea was to keep every department separate, but we're running into little snags, so we may have to combine. So have a great time on your field work. We'll see you in August. I don't have, oh, better check the date right now that I've got my module thing open. Starting mod 4 on July 18th. And I'll get it published though. If you want to get started earlier, I'll get it published. I'm not going to promise, but hopefully soon. As soon as I publish it, I'll let you know, Alistair, and then you can get started early if you like. So and 4 is going to be a long module. It's 0 to 3. I kind of broke them up. Mod 4 is going to be in parts, and each part is going to be like a week. Just trying to keep in themes, and I also don't want too many modules. So some modules are going to be longer and they're going to be divided into parts. And then like this mod 4, everything will be due September 4th, but I'm giving you suggested dates so you don't just at the end get everything done. Boom. You can pace yourself by week if you'd like there. Any other questions before we go? Okay. We will, oh, one more thing. Mod 4 is kind of long, is long, about a month and a half, and that might be too long between Zoom check-ins. I may add another Zoom check-in like in part 3, just so we don't go too long before we check in. And then we have too much to cover once we come for our final check-in. So if I do that, add another check-in, I'll send an announcement out. Any changes, any communications, I communicate through announcements. So just be checking those guys and you'll keep up to date. And Alistair and Ian have been using the course chat. So Haley and Renee, if you'd like to do that. I haven't used it yet, and I think it's really cool. So it's just kind of like instant messaging in the moment, which is really nice. So you guys can use that too if you like. All right, we'll stop here. Have a great work trip. It's not a vacation, right? Have a great work trip.